Live from London, this is BBC News. President Trump says he'd like Arab nations to take in 1.5 million Gazans, calling the Strip a demolition site where something needs to happen.
I'd like Egypt to take people, and I'd like Jordan to take people. You're talking about probably 1.5 million people, and we just clean out that whole thing.
Lebanon says the Israeli army has killed 11 people and wounded 83 in the country's south as a deadline for the IDF to leave expires. Chancellor Rachel Reeves announces proposed changes to England's planning system aimed at boosting economic growth. And Belarus is voting in a presidential election with Alexander Lukashenko all but certain to secure a 7th term. Hello, I'm Nikki Schiller. Welcome to the programme. We start this hour in the Middle East with comments by President Trump on Gaza. He said he'd like to see 1.5 million of its residents taken in by other Arab nations, including Jordan and Egypt. He told journalists the Strip was literally a demolition site and suggested it be cleaned out. Israeli bombardments have reduced much of Gaza to rubble. Mr. Trump's comments will be seen as unacceptable by Palestinians who see Gaza as their homeland and by Arab countries which reject the forced displacement of people. Hamas says it will oppose plans to relocate Palestinians, whilst Islamic Jihad says the plans will encourage Israel to commit war crimes. But Mr. Trump's comments are already being welcomed by far-right Israeli politicians, some of whom want to restore Jewish settlements there. Let's take a listen to what President Trump told reporters on Air Force One.
I'm looking at the whole Gaza Strip right now, and it's a mess. It's a real mess.
So you'd like Jordan to house people from Gaza?
To take people. I'd like Egypt to take people. I'm talking to General El-Sisi tomorrow, sometime, I believe. And I'd like Egypt to take people, and I'd like Jordan to take people. You're talking about probably 1.5 million people, and we just clean out that whole thing. It's it's over the centuries that's had many conflicts that site, and I don't know. It's something has to happen, but. It's literally a demolition site right now. Almost everything's demolished, and people are dying there. So I'd rather get involved with some of the Arab nations and build housing at a different location where they can maybe live in peace for a change.
Temporarily, or would they ever go back?
It could be either. It could be temporarily, could be long term.
Well, President Trump's comments came as thousands of displaced Palestinians are being prevented from returning to their homes in the north of the Gaza Strip after Israel accused Hamas of breaching the terms of their ceasefire deal. Now, these are live pictures from Gaza where people are waiting to return to their homes. There were some chaotic scenes on Saturday evening as Palestinians who had expected to be able to walk north following the completion of the hostage release found the road was still blocked by Israeli tanks. Israel has so far prevented them crossing into the north until plans are in place for the release of the Israeli civilian Arbel Yehud, who is being held by Islamic Jihad. The dispute came after Hamas freed 4 Israeli women soldiers on Saturday. They had been taken hostage from a military base on the Gaza border in the 7th of October 2023 attacks. And 200 Palestinian inmates were released from Israeli prisons, the second exchange to take place as part of the Gaza ceasefire deal. Our correspondent Nick Beake is in Jerusalem and has more on President Trump's comments and reaction to them.
From the Israeli perspective, the right wing here has already said that this is fantastic news. You've got prominent right-wing politicians saying that this is exactly what they want to be hearing from America. We know that there are far-right extremists here who say that Gaza should be their homeland and they'd like to see Jewish settlers move there. In terms of the reaction from Palestinians, if you put yourself in the position of those families, we saw pictures just a moment ago of people waiting to move from the south where they've been displaced back to the north to try and find out what remains of their homes. I think there's a few ways of looking at this. Clearly, their immediate priority is getting back home. But when they hear that sort of language from President Trump saying that Gaza's a wasteland, it's in ruins, it's over, clear the whole place out, that would be concerning. And also we've seen in the choice of the next American ambassador to Israel, this is someone, Mike Huckabee, who previously has rejected the idea of a Palestinian state, among other things. On the other hand, President Trump says he wants peace in the Middle East. He wants to strike bargains around the world, do deals, and included in that would be, you'd imagine, a deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia and Arab countries around here. There's no way they would countenance the expulsion, the moving out of Palestinians. So two ways of looking at these comments that President Trump has made today. Off the fly, it would seem, he didn't really give a huge amount of policy detail, and when he was asked whether this was a temporary solution or a long-term thing, he said either could work.
Yeah, I'm just seeing reports that a Hamas official has vowed to, quote, oppose President Trump's idea of relocating Gazans. The President talked about how he was going to talk to Jordan and Egypt. How are they likely to react to what he has suggested in those comments on Air Force One?
Well, I think like everyone, they'll be trying to assess them and put them in the context of decades of American foreign policy, which has said that ultimately there should be a Palestinian state. The Biden administration were clear about that, and you had President Biden and Antony Blinken, his Secretary of State, and others talking about reconstructing Gaza for Gazans. Clearly this is a huge operation, but the Arab states were looking towards that. So we'll have to see what reaction comes in from the likes of Jordan and Egypt during the day. But clearly this is diametrically opposed to the direction they want to head in terms of beginning this task of rebuilding Gaza. But of course, that's weeks, months off, because we're just a week into this very fragile ceasefire.
Yeah, and on that, thousands of Palestinians, as we've said, are trying to get back into northern Gaza. But again, Prime Minister Netanyahu's office saying Hamas have breached the ceasefire deal. Why are they saying that Hamas have breached the deal?
So this all boils down to the fate of one particular civilian hostage, Arbel Yahoud. She is 29 years old. It was widely expected and reported in the Israeli media over the past week that she would be released yesterday. But on Friday night, when Hamas gave the list of the 4 women to be released, she wasn't on it. And in fact, they were 4 soldiers. So Israel says that Hamas has basically undermined the deal, which says, in essence, that civilians should be released before soldiers. So what's happened is Israel says that as a result, they are stopping all those Palestinian families in the south of Gaza moving to the north. They were getting ready to make that move with all the possessions they still have. So what's happened now is that Hamas have said, well, actually, she'll be released next weekend. And Hamas and Islamic Jihad, another militant group, have apparently provided proof of life for this civilian. And so it would seem now we're waiting for the Israelis to say whether or not this satisfies them, and they will give the green light to that huge number of people being able to move from the south of Gaza further to the north.
Nick Big in Jerusalem. Let's speak now to Gershon Baskin, who is also in Jerusalem. He's a hostage negotiator and the Middle East director for the International Communities Organisation. That's a UK-based non-governmental organisation. Thank you for joining us on BBC News. I wondered if I could first ask you for a reaction to those comments from President Trump saying that he wants Egypt and Jordan to take in Palestinians from Gaza.
These are obviously comments that were not thought out very deeply and not talked about with experts in the region. On the one side, Palestinians should have the right to choose where they want to live, but in the real world, not everyone gets to pick where they want to live. Countries have limitations on who they open their doors to and how many people they're willing to take in. We see Trump instituting a policy in America to deport millions of people living in the United States who chose to live in the United States without the permission of the United States. If this were to happen in Gaza with Egypt and Jordan, we are risking the stability of the regimes of both those countries that both have peace with Israel. This is a very dangerous statement for Trump to be making, and even uttering the statement itself can shake the regimes in Egypt and Jordan, because at the root of this is the Palestinian issue and the demand of most of the world, and certainly the entire Arab world, that the occupation of Israel over Palestinian lands be ended and that Palestinians be allowed to create a state of their own. And what many Arabs interpret Trump's statement as being is ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip.
Well, of course, we don't know exactly what President Trump meant by his words. We can only just play the words themselves. On the wider issue, you've been involved in the hostage negotiations. And of course, we are in this first phase of the ceasefire deal and hostage release deal. Israel has accused Hamas of ceasefire violations, indeed, the one that Nick mentioned over the not releasing of a certain civilian. But also they're now saying that they're failing to provide an agreed list of the status of the remaining hostages. How difficult is it at this time where there are still negotiations going on, and how do they actually work, you having been part of them?
Right. Well, it's a very dangerous period right now because the ceasefire is very fragile. The list of names or the condition of the remaining hostages is talking about 26 hostages that are supposed to be released in the first 42 days, according to the agreement that was reached with the help of Qatar, Egypt, and the United States. There are a total of 90 hostages left in Gaza, who the remaining are supposed to be released in phase 2 of the deal. Phase 2 negotiations are supposed to begin no later than the 16th day of the current ceasefire period. It's unlikely that they will begin or end on the scheduled date, given the relationship between the two people. Here we have the difficult situation of a clash of interest between Prime Minister Netanyahu protecting his relationship with President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu keeping his coalition government intact, because another party has threatened to bolt the coalition if the deal goes through and leads to the end of the war. If that were to happen, Netanyahu would lose his majority and we would likely see Israel heading for another round of elections. If he doesn't agree to move forward with this deal, he's going to potentially jeopardize the relationship between the State of Israel and President Trump.
Gershom Baskin, thank you very much for your time on BBC News. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, the UN's Palestinian refugee